Today we're going to be looking at a new concept today in science. We're going to be looking at the flow of energy. Alright, so I know you all might not know exactly what that means, but I do want to go ahead and point out that it's directly related to something that we learned in second grade. Does anybody remember what a food chain is? Okay, Rogelio, go ahead. Exactly, a food chain is when you have a diagram that shows different animals and the different things that they eat. We know that some animals eat grass, they eat maybe like vegetables or fruits, and we have some animals that eat what? Exactly, they eat meat, they eat other animals, okay? So a flow of energy in an ecosystem is directly related to the food chain. And we're gonna go ahead and look at this and learn about it using a picture diagram. And afterwards, I want you to do a descriptive writing about what we've learned, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and read our objective. Read it out loud together. It says, students will be able to describe the flow of energy in an ecosystem using a picture diagram, okay? So exactly what we said, because we went ahead and read it all out loud together. And so remember, when we do picture diagrams, it has three parts that we need to focus on in order to separate everything so we can break it down and really learn and understand the new concept. So the first part is, I want everybody to put up the number one. It's our introduction, okay? And I say use the number one because introduction is the very first thing that we see. It's the first thing that we see a part of our picture diagram, and also the first part of our descriptive writing, okay? And the second part is going to be, go like this. This is our body, okay? And we notice that our physical, natural body, it's the biggest part that takes up most of our human body. And so this has all the vital and the important and everything that the body needs is right here. And so just like that, our picture diagram also is going to be our biggest portion of the picture diagram. And lastly, we have our conclusion. This is where we sum up all of our ideas and restate what we learned from our introduction and our body, and we put it into our own words to a way that we understand it. And that's the ending of our picture diagram. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and separate our picture diagram. Remember, we have to do two different lines. We're going to have one at the very tip top and one at the very bottom. Okay, and we do it just like this, so we can have the introduction at the very top, our body, which takes up the biggest part of our picture diagram, and the conclusion is at the very, very bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and label this. I for introduction, B for body, C for conclusion. Okay? And we remember that when we start off in the introduction, and we put what up here? Do we all remember? Antonio. Right, we put our subject. Okay, and what do we all say our subject was today? Say it all together. Ready? The flow of energy. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and write that in. Flow of energy. And we're going to go ahead and define that. Okay? But we don't know what that is yet, right? We said we have kind of a small idea because we said that it's related to the food chain, but that doesn't give us the exact definition of what it is. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our body, break it down, look at the key terms, the vocabulary that's a part of it, then we'll go ahead and make our definition based off of those things, okay? So when we talk about the flow of energy in an ecosystem, we have to understand and remember that energy comes from where? The main energy source of the planet Earth and animals and everything that lives on the planet comes from where? Joe, go ahead. The sun, exactly. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to point this out, and we're going to make sure that we have this labeled as the source of our energy, right? Because we're talking about the energy flow of an ecosystem, okay? But that energy doesn't just stay there. It has to go somewhere, right? We all get it. We get it from the plants, from the animals, everything that is involved in the entire Earth. So how does it get there is my first question. Okay, I'm going to draw a little arrow. Right, it's absorbed by the grass, by the vegetation. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a little patch of grass here. And this is a very important part of the flow of energy. And we're going to come back to it, okay? Alright, there's my little patch of grass. Alright, and from there, what happens next? Remember, earlier we were talking about the food chain. So that means, what do you think that means? What can we infer by that? Antonio. Exactly, that means we're talking about the transfer of energy moving how? By being eaten, okay? So the same way that, say if you were feeling hungry right before lunch, you're just like, oh, I'm so drained, I just have no energy. But then after you eat lunch, you go to recess, you come back, you feel good, right? You feel energized, you feel better, and you feel more aware and back to where you should be. So that works the same way with different organisms in the environment. So after the sun gives off its energy to the grass and it's absorbed, this energy goes off to another organism. Can anybody have a guess of what might go to the next place? Madeline. Exactly. Maybe like a small little bug, right? Maybe like a grasshopper. These type of organisms eat grass. Okay? Alright, so there's my little small grasshopper. Okay? And then from there, like any other organism in the food chain, it has to be eaten by something, right? So we're going to go ahead and draw our next line, our next arrow. And we're going to put, let's see, Rogelio, what would we put? Good. Okay, so we'll put maybe a little mouse, huh? Because like we know mice love little bugs and little critters. Okay? So draw a little teeny tiny cute mouse. How's that look? Alright. So then after that, since we were talking about the flow of energy and we're relating it to the food chain, we know that this little mouse eventually is going to have to be eaten by something else, huh? So let's think, what could be another organism that might possibly have mice as a part of their diet? Go ahead, Jimmy. Good, that's a good one. We're going to go ahead and say snakes, right? Snakes. These organisms, some snakes do have mice a part of their diet. So we go ahead and draw this little slivery, slimy snake. Alright, I have it right there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we'll stop here and then we'll look at all the different parts of our flow of energy. We see that these arrows indicate that energy is passing from the sun to the grass, to the grasshopper, to the mice, and to the snake. Okay, so all these different organisms a part of this flow of energy have special names, and we're going to go ahead and label these. So we know this, the sun is the source, so we'll go ahead and label that as the source of all of our energy. From there, it goes down to the first organisms that actually take that energy and make it into food or make it into something that we can use. We call these special organisms here the producers. And they're called producers because they make their own food and they make energy available to other organisms that wouldn't be able to get direct energy from the sun. Okay, so that's why it's necessary for these organisms to eat the other organisms before them. Okay, so moving on from the producer, we have, this is what's called a consumer. Now consumers are organisms that eat other organisms. So if I were to ask, what are humans? What do you think we would be? Rogelio. Consumers, exactly, because like the grasshopper, we also eat some type of vegetables and fruits, right? But then also, like mice, we eat other animals. We eat different types of cows for burgers or chickens, right? So if we'd be consumers because we'd eat these other organisms, what do you think the mouse is? Good, good. It's a consumer as well. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and go into our very last organism that we have a part of our flow of energy map. And here we have a snake. And there's nothing we have else besides a snake. So we're going to say a part of this ecosystem, this organism is the top predator. But it's not just the top predator. This has a special name for it. This one is called the apex predator. Okay, and apex is just another fancy word for top. It means the tip top, highest. There's no higher above that. Of course, there are other things that do eat snakes, but for our sake, for this energy map flow that we have, we're going to go ahead and say that the snake is our top predator. Okay? Alright, so now that we've looked at this and we've drawn on our flow chart, what do we think we can say about the flow of energy? Let's say, we can maybe say the flow of energy is when energy is exchanged between organisms. And how is it exchanged? You remember? Right, by consuming, by eating the other. So it starts off, the source of energy, producers produce the food for their own organisms, Then the first consumer, the little grasshopper, eats the grass. And then what eats the grasshopper? The little mouse. And then from here, this consumer is eaten by what we know as the apex predator, the snake, the very top of the food chain. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and go down to our conclusion. And we're gonna write out what we learned. So let's say, what do you think we could say? Aiden, what could we say? Good. All right, so a part of our conclusion, we could say the flow of energy is the passing of energy through multiple food chains. Right? We could say that, huh? Because in a different food chain, it may not be the same as this one, but they all start with the same things. They all have the source, the sunlight, gives energy to the producer, which gives energy in turn to consumer, followed by another consumer, and then ultimately ends up at the apex predator. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and use this picture diagram that we've learned that's consisting of the introduction, the body, and the conclusion, and we're gonna go ahead and write a descriptive writing piece. And also in that, we will have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. All right, thank you very much.